I know that from the very beginning there was concern about the power of the judiciary in relation with religion as well. That Patrick Henry, the great spokesman who really sparked the revolution in many ways, he said one time, quote, "Power is the great evil with which we are contending. We have divided power between three branches of government and erected checks and balances to prevent abuse of power. However, where is the check on the power of the judiciary? If we fail to check the power of the judiciary, I predict that we will eventually live under judicial tyranny." This is Patrick Henry from the beginning had that concern. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, Dennis was with us at a rally in Washington, D.C. We were protesting the actions of a court there in Washington, D.C., Superior Court, in a case that's now 9 years old, that's developed as part of a schism of the Unification Church movement. And, you know, it's one religious side against another religious side, which according to the First Amendment should never be brought up in court. Courts should have no say on that. And in this particular court case, where one religious nonprofit was challenged by you could say the first part of the Unification Movement, or first entity, then the first judge ruled correctly that this was a religious dispute, obviously, and therefore, according to First Amendment, should be dismissed from the court, should be settled in another way. There's no judge who can decide what faith is right and which one is not right, and so on. However, that on appeal was sent back to the courts, and then one judge there, Judge Cordero, gave a summary judgment in which she made all kinds of decisions about which faith was correct, which one was wrong, and pending punishment on the one that she decided was not correct. In spite of tremendous evidence against that kind of decision. This is the kind of case that we're very, very concerned about and are fighting about, because if this is upheld, where a judge can just decide on a minority faith in such a religious dispute, then the judge, that opens the door. The judges can decide the fate of many different religious entities, churches, nonprofits, so on and so on. So this is a huge concern for us. And in that, when that judge who made this egregious breaking of the First Amendment and egregious abuse of the judicial power, when she came up for review for appointment, over 5,000 people sent emails from around the world about this case to the commission deciding her reappointment, telling them of the mistakes she made, and so on. But we came to find out that this commission has no entity ruling over it. And then we checked into it for the last 13 years. The commission who decides about these judges in Washington, D.C., they have ruled in every single case for 13 years that the judge in question was given the highest qualification, the most highly qualified, no matter who they were, no matter what level of competency they had. And the reason was this blocked the executive from being able to make any input onto the decision of the reappointment of the judges. So it's kind of complicated, but we're seeing the abuse of judicial power, and the very things that Patrick Henry was worried about, we're experiencing. So I'd like to just open the door there. Dennis, would you like to share, and then I'll turn to Kevin about this judicial encroachment.
Certainly. You know, Abraham Lincoln once also said that you need to follow the law until we can change the law. He was showing respect to the law And a lot of good people, law-abiding people, obey the law. And essentially, the law is the foundation. The unfortunate reality is that part of our history indicates that people have decided that they are above the law, whether they're a politician running for office or who has been elected to office, or someone who has been elected to some minor position. Lincoln said, if you want to see what a person is really like, trust them with a little bit of power. Well, these judges are not elected. They're appointed. And when they get a little bit of power, unfortunately for the Supreme Court or other elected officials, they can stay in those positions a long, long time. The reality is that means that if they change over time as they grow older and grow more incompetent, I know that as I grow older, hard to believe, but I become less competent in many ways. My vision, my hearing. And in reality, I heard Mark Levin ranting about the justices, and he gave a whole historical perception on the different justices who became so incompetent that they didn't even know what day it was sometimes, let alone what the case was about. But in reality, this is our system that the founding fathers gave to us. I want to say that case astounded me. I mean, it kind of woke me up, but it kind of verified what I knew already. Washington, D.C. especially is a cesspool. President Trump was elected to try and drain that swamp. But I think that there are cesspools all over the country. There's plenty to go around for everybody to drain. But when you have judges that are repeatedly approved by a self-ruling body, self-officiating, it's like, you don't make any impact. Even as a citizen, even if you're 5,000 or 50,000 or 5 million people, you're not going to necessarily affect what those judges will do because they are insulated. And it's very much like being part of a teachers union or being part of a governmental agency. Once you're hired pretty much for life, and you're entrenched there. You have a real good guaranteed job. And this is a minor level, let alone you're talking about judges. So personally, I feel that there needs to be a mechanism in our society. One of the things that I feel, I'm very happy about is a watchdog group called Judicial Watch. And they file lawsuits on behalf of the people so that we can get the information that, government officials freely hide. There's no real transparency. So I feel that in reality, that kind of watchdog group is critical, and I would hope others spring up, take the lead from Tom Fitton and Judicial Watch. But also I'm encouraged, even by the people that we can criticize. The Supreme Court just recently came out and made 2 incredible decisions in favor of religious freedom. The Little Sisters of the Poor case and Our Lady of Guadalupe School were victories just the other day for religious freedom. And I think that it's turning the tide. I really feel that has to happen at the top level. Those people, as I said earlier, we all have consciences. They need to look in the mirror and see what it is that they have become. Let their conscience be their guide, because if they truly allow that to happen, they can make right decisions. They can understand the value of religion, and especially the value of morality among people who have little faith. Those people are making decisions on a regular basis that affect the whole country. So partly I pray for those people, And I think that a lot of prayers have been answered in recent weeks. We lose some, but we win some. We got to keep working to keep winning. And with this case that you're talking about, I believe that you may have to go all the way to the Supreme Court, to be able to get the right thing done.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Kevin, you've worked with so many different faiths in your history. Much interfaith work, working directly with many ministers all across the country and even in other countries. I wanted to ask you, from your experience, have you seen a problem with judiciary encroachment on religions? Have you been with some victims of this kind of situation yourself?
Yeah, well, I think it's been, it didn't just start, but this has been a growing problem in our country. It really took root, I would say, at the turn of the century, and not the 21st century, but the 20th century, and the rise of the progressive movement in the United States. And the progressives, people like Woodrow Wilson, Oliver Wendell Holmes, John Dewey, Frank Goodenow, and so forth, they really took very public stands against the founders and against the founding ideals. I think it was Wilson that said, yes, repeat the Declaration of Independence, but remove the preface, which is where the fundamental
Whoa, wait a minute.
values are. We are created equal, we're endowed by the Creator. And this is something the progressives really contend. They don't like the idea that the individual is authorized by God with inalienable rights. I think it was Goodenow that pointed to Europe and said, in Europe, they don't believe rights are endowed by the Creator. They believe that rights of the individual are endowed by the legislative authority that deems what is in the interest of society. And that's really what we're facing in this country today, is that idea that the elites who know better than us should basically dictate the policy, and then we just basically go along with it. And this is manifested in the judiciary, over the history of the judiciary, where the founders' intention was that the Supreme Court and judges in general would basically rule on the validity of a law with regard to what the Constitution asserts. And the reason that was important is because, it isn't really correct to say the founders wrote the Constitution. Well, they did propose it, but it was we, the people, that ratified the Constitution. So what the Constitution is we, the people, determining how our authority, which is granted to us by God. No, there's no government institution that has its own authority and power. It is all bequeathed by our consent. And the Constitution basically is how we, the people, have decided our authority to govern will be distributed and organized. And,
Yes.
and one of those ways is with the judiciary, a co-equal branch with the legislature and with the executive. And of course, that's totally turned upside down now. But the role of the judiciary was to interpret law based on the Constitution.
Yes.
And but the progressives really changed that. They interpret the Constitution as, and I think it was Wilson that termed it as a living and breathing document, and criticized the founders, saying they were Newtonian in their view, which means more like a fixed, scientific, mechanical. The Constitution is fixed. It's not changeable unless the people change it. But Wilson said, no, the Constitution is more Darwinian. It evolves and it develops in collaboration with the contemporary mores of the contemporary society, which essentially means a constitution can mean whatever you want it to mean. And of course, an extreme example of that is we see, I think it was Justice Ginsburg that said, well, we don't have to just look at our constitution. We can look at other constitutions around the world to base our decisions, which really is just another way of saying whatever I think, I'll just shop it around until I find somebody out there that has a constitution that might agree with it.
Yes.
And so what you have is a judicial tyranny. But fortunately, and as as Denny mentioned, the Supreme Court has been very consistent in asserting that judges do not have the authority to make decisions about religious, ecclesiastic structure and authority, about religious dogma or doctrine, that is not their role. And just, I think it was even yesterday, the decision came out that again affirmed that. And the thing that should be concerning the unification movement is somewhat a minority movement. So it's easy to say, oh, well, that's, it's a small group. It's not of our interest. But the precedent that will come out of this is a total denial of everything thus far the Supreme Court has affirmed. And therefore, it should be the concern of every religious person. If, in fact, a judge can decide what aspect of your faith is in the public interest.
Yes.
And oh my God, with the socialists out there and their motive, anybody can sue a church for hate speech. We've already seen examples. I think it was in Houston, where the mayor of Houston wanted all the clergy to submit their sermons because she wanted to peruse it for hate speech. And it was under the Obama administration that they had a religious freedom, a religious council or a civil rights council. And their conclusion that any affirmation of religious freedom or call to religious freedom was just religious people looking for cover to cover their bigotry and discrimination. And that's really dangerous language. That's very dangerous because, again, it gives the court the authority to examine your faith and say, well, this is not in the interest of society, and this is, in fact, hate speech, and you need to be, treated accordingly to that decision. And that is not in any way, shape, or form what the founders wanted.
There was a case in Southern California where somebody was in the congregation with a minister in the front preaching. And in reality, that person left, brought the police back. They arrested the minister for hate speech. Now, of course, it went to the court system, and the legal team were able to get those people, off. But just the process of doing something like that sends a message, sets a precedent for other people in other states wanting to do something.
Right.
In reality, it's a very unhealthy.
It is a punishment. Dennis, I agree. It's a punishment to be brought into court on these kind of charges. The case I'm talking about, which involves Dr. Yunjin Preston Moon being accused about his dealing with a nonprofit based on his faith, has cost hundreds of millions of dollars for both sides over 9 years. And that is a tremendous, tremendous punishment already, just being brought up like that. And we know how easy it is to attack a religion. We know, the Jews were the scapegoats in Europe. What's all the problems? The problems are all the Jews. So what's the ultimate solution? Get rid of all of them. This historical attack on faith is quite easy to do. If you enjoyed this discussion, please click the like button and the subscribe button. We'd also love to hear your thoughts on religious freedom.